He Who Remains claims to be the sole victor of the multiversal war, a war that comprised entirely of variants of himself. It was only once He Who Remains utilized the power of Alioth the Usurper that he was able to overcome the tyranny of the others, in a sense becoming a benevolent leader over the sacred timeline, constructing the sacred timeline in an order that he saw fit, and in an order where the MCU as we know it could continue as He Who Remains solely dictated. In a sense, He Who Remains has been a god of the MCU up until this point, but as we saw in the finale of Loki, he is able to be killed. But this claim by He Who Remains is absolutely massive. The idea that he has dictated all of the events in the Infinity Saga leading up into Loki. So, is this in fact true? Is He Who Remains a variant of Kang the Conqueror, responsible for how exactly everything has played out in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as we know it? And is he the sole orchestrator of Avengers Endgame, Infinity War, and all the way back to the first Iron Man in 2008? Today, watchers of the Marvel Multiverse, we may have an answer for you, and one that comes as quite a shock. In an interview with The Direct, they sat down with Loki director Kate Herron, who offered her own opinion on how the multiverse has been conducted in the sacred timeline, and how it has been governed up until this point by He Who Remains, offering her insight into whether or not this variant of Kang has been responsible for all of the events in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This was her response to that question posed by The Direct. I suppose by our show's logic, yes. He says, I paved the road, you just walked down it. In theory, he would have scripted that, because by our show's logic, that's what we're saying. Everything has been predetermined by one character. Even up to this point, we've believed that the characters in Marvel have had free will, which I think is kind of the fun rug pull of our show, isn't it? So according to the director of Loki, there is no essential free will in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Kang, or this variant of Kang, He Who Remains, has been responsible for it all. The characters have been utterly unaware of it. This doesn't mean though that the characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe are simply playthings, as they do essentially have to walk down the road, but they do have to walk down the road that He Who Remains has paved and set before them. In the same interview, however, she would later go on to explain comments made by He Who Remains, stating that she believes that he is telling the truth when they pass the threshold. Quote, I do believe that that moment when they pass this threshold, he is telling the truth, where he's like, we're in completely unforeseen time now. I don't know what's going to happen, because there's an interesting discussion at hand. She would later in the interview even go into more detail about He Who Remains, and what exactly it means when he says see you soon. Even though technically he is in fact dying here and this variant of Kang will not reappear as far as we know. The director does confirm though that He Who Remains has looked into various futures similar to the way that Doctor Strange did in Avengers Infinity War, searching through multiple timelines. They're eerily similar in fact, with these being her comments on the matter. When the head's cut off of the middle timekeeper, it does whisper, see you soon, which is the very last thing that He Who Remains says to Sylvie. But my theory, how I interpret it anyway, is that he's saying he's gone through every possible scenario, so he probably has an idea of what would happen if Sylvie won this fight, or if Loki won the fight, but he can't quite predict it. He can't write that, because obviously they're their own people. In my head, I'm like, oh, I think he planned to say that to her. If that happened, that's how I see it. It explains that He Who Remains, once she passes that threshold, doesn't know exactly what is going on. But according to this theory posed by the director of Loki, she believes that he does have some sort of an idea what they may be in store for concerning his variants. And exactly what he means, see you soon, he is referring to his other variants. Some far likely more tyrannical variants such as Kang the Conqueror. Something intriguing to point out in this interview, however, is that the Loki director is simply proposing her own theories on the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it's not exactly set into stone. This isn't like someone like Kevin Feige talking about it, where his word essentially is truth and confirmation in the Marvel Universe because he's the one that dictates what's going to happen. This director of Loki, however, can only speculate where it's going to go in the future. So we can't take every little word that she says as doctrine, simply her interpretations of what is going on. Therefore, it is her interpretation that there has been no free will in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that it has all been dictated by He Who Remains. And it is her interpretation that He Who Remains was able to look through the timeline into the future. And although he cannot determine exactly what is going to happen once he is killed by Sylvie, he may have an idea of what is to come, and has looked through various different timelines. According to her though, He Who Remains has been behind Avengers Endgame, Avengers Infinity War, and the entirety of the Infinity Saga. It is by his hand that the Avengers managed to defeat Thanos and bring back half of all life in the universe. And all of the Marvel Universe has been scripted up until the point he says, "We have passed the threshold now." From that point on, there is now free will essentially in the Marvel Universe, but also a chaotic timeline to come. Anyway though, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on He Who Remains as a character? And is he the ultimate power in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Has he essentially been the god of the Marvel Universe leading up until this point? If everything has been predetermined and destined by this one character, and if this is the benevolent version of what is to come, what do you think an individual like Kang will be like in the future of the Marvel Universe? There's a lot to unpack in this video, guys, but I want to hear your thoughts on it, and leave your thoughts on everything we discussed in the comments down below. How seriously do you take the director's comments on He Who Remains and the Loki series? Are they doctrine to you and canon to you in the Marvel Universe until otherwise? Or is this simply conjecture on her part? As always, my friends, hit that subscribe button to assemble and join our team, and have a great day.